Thank you very much, Patricia and team. That was a fantastic panel. But as Patricia said, we always come back to talking about the same things. We're all terrified about the security issues and the privacy issues. I'm going to pick up on a point Laura made that we discussed at the Global Commission on Internet Governance, which is and I think I said earlier, the Internet of Things is not an internet. We would defend the open, free, universal internet to the death almost. But one of the saving graces potentially from the way the Internet of Things is being introduced is that the things are in silos at the moment, and that is potentially a way to reduce the cybersecurity threat. And I just want to echo the point Laura made, because I think this is really, really important. So whoever's writing the report, get that bit in from Laura. Where is he ever? It's really important, I think, to understand those differences and in a way celebrate them. Whilst we're looking for standards, we do have to find out how we protect ourselves and our institutions. Also, again, reminded of how long it is since we've been discussing these things in the research front. Dave talking about amorphous computing, that brings back some memories. Anyway, it's now my pleasure to introduce Marina Kaljurand. Is that how you pronounce it? We are very lucky to have her here. Never thought she'd say yes. We invited her and she said yes, and it's absolutely fabulous. She's flown in from Tallinn. She has an amazing background, and you have her bio there. She was the Estonian foreign minister quite recently, and is now currently the chair of a new global commission on the stability of cyberspace, which has a lot of very eminent people on it, and is another one of these think tanks that will hopefully come up with a impactful report in this area. She's going to talk to us today about cybersecurity and the Internet of Things, I think, and I'm just so looking forward to hearing from her. Marina, over to you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, Wendy, thank you so much for a very kind introduction. And I'd also like to thank the Royal Society for organizing this timely event on a very interesting topic. And trust me, it's good to get away also from Tallinn from time to time, although the flight is much shorter. Yes, I come from Tallinn. I come from Estonia. 1.3 million, the first country in the world to fall under cyber attacks, for politically motivated cyber attacks, the first country in the world to introduce paperless e-government, the first country in the world to introduce internet voting, and we will have our next round of votings in 2 weeks. We've been doing it since 2005. The first country in the world to introduce digital signatures. With a population of 1.3 million, so far we have given 350 million digital signatures. So to start with, I'd like to refer to Prince Hamlet and to his famous monologue. His question, to be or not to be, that is the question. In Estonia, we asked more or less the same question at the beginning of the 90s, to E or not to E. And since then, we have become E-vulnerable, E-dependent, we call it E-lifestyle. So, of course, what I'm going to say today, I've been influenced by the country where I grew up, worked by the E-society we're having, and it's not only my personal influence, but I think that the whole Estonian society is very much influenced by that. I do not have academic background, I do not have technical background, I'm just a diplomat. So I'll be happy to share some of my thoughts about cybersecurity and Internet of Things, where I see the challenges, and maybe propose a couple of solutions how to tackle those challenges. But let's start with history. The history of the Internet began with the development of electronic computers in the 50s. 40 years later, since the mid-90s, the Internet has had a revolutionary impact on culture, commerce, technology, including the rise of near instant communications by electronic mail, and so on, and so on, and so on. The Internet of Things is still an emerging phenomena that merges cyber and physical, brings together cyber infrastructure with the physical world. If I compare it to the history of the Internet, then I would argue that we are still in the 50s or even 60s. But we will not have 40 years. The developments will be much more quick. We will not have 40 years to get adjusted and get prepared for the invasion of IoT. The IoT is believed to create new opportunities for economic growth and development, make the use of ICTs smarter, improve the lives of users. IoT is also a trigger of value shift. The real value is no longer in the product as such, but in the opportunity it can offer to users in terms of accessing information and experience. According to the European Commission study, the market value of the IoT in the EU is expected to exceed 1 trillion euros in 2020. The demand for digital technologies will continue to grow, as nearly 61% of the world's population has yet to go online. IoT is forecast to expand from a mere 4.6 billion devices in 2015 to more than 16 billion units into 2021, according to Ericsson. Today it is impossible to foresee all the changes that IoT will bring along, both opportunities and challenges. But it can be predicted that immense enlargement of activities in cyberspace, accompanied by a vast increase of actors in the field, will have a huge impact on all aspects of cybersecurity. And I'd like to mention a couple of them. First, the lines between the different types of threats and attacks are already blurred and will blur even more. Cyberspace is increasingly being used for political purposes and specific geostrategic interests. Cyber operations represent a new hybrid threat, a mixture of conventional and unconventional, military and non-military, that can be used in a coordinated manner. So far, state-sponsored cyber operations have mostly been used to test the waters and see how affected governments and institutions, but also international community, will react. Nevertheless, recent high-profile attacks are a clear signal that politically motivated cyber attacks are gaining in scale, hostility, and sophistication. Second, there will be more actors, including criminals and terrorists. So far, we haven't seen terror attacks using ICTs, but I'm sure it's tempting, because cyber tools offer an attractive weapon, cheap, effective, high impact, difficult to predict and prevent, hard to trace and attribute. Cyber fighters are now active in addition to more conventional cyber spies. Cybercrime is a service and sold over the darknet. 3. The number of users of ICT products will grow immensely. Cyber vulnerabilities will extend from independent countries and homes to all homes, from talking teddy bears to connected cars and smart houses. We become more and more exposed. There will be more users with very different awareness level and readiness to accept and respect cyber hygiene. Just to remind, almost 95% of cyber operations have occurred due to human mistakes and poor cyber hygiene. Although 9 out of 10 Europeans are changing the way they use the internet to address security concerns, many still consider security measures to be more of a burden than an indispensable necessity, and only take the most limited action to counter the hazards, according to special Eurobarometer on cybersecurity of 2015. Also, the same report underlines that people in Europe do not feel sufficiently informed or prepared for cyber threats. It means that much attention has to be paid to education and awareness raising. It means that cybersecurity should be a subject of lifelong learning, starting from the first graders and never ending. The character of vulnerabilities will change. Individual cyber threats will become more serious. Even when users take precautions to secure their information, there are factors that are beyond their control. Privacy risks will increase. IoT will also have an impact on the question of data ownership. Who owns my medical data? My doctor? Data generators? Myself? Can I trade my data? Are there going to be data trading markets? Fifth, the role of industry and private sector will be more important. Starting from readiness and commitment to cybersecurity and concluding with willingness to invest in cybersecurity to the detriment of losing in competitiveness. The question is industry ready to compromise profits just because improving cybersecurity is the right thing to do and people are ready to buy cheaper products? According to the joint communication to the European Parliament and the Council Resilience, Deterrence and Defence report, tens of billions of IoT devices are expected to be connected to the internet by 2020, but cybersecurity is not yet prioritized in their design. It means that a push is needed from governments and international organizations. From here, I'd like to continue with the public-private partnership, which finally should become reality. It can't continue being just a political concept. It has to become an effective and working partnership. Cybersecurity has to be all-national, all-inclusive partnership. Back in Estonia, we have learned from our mistakes, we have learned from our experience, we have learned our lessons. During the 2007 cyber attacks, DDoS attacks, private sector was the one to come to assist the government. Voluntarily, out of patriotism, the geeks from IT sector and private sector, whom we can never afford in the government, came voluntarily, and they stayed. A year later, Cyber Defense Unit was launched, and that two-way cooperation has continued since then. What are the interests of the private sector? They want to be in the same information loop. They want to participate in the same exercises. They want to have access to government. They want to influence government policies. So patriotism is there, but there is also much more. On the EU level, there have been attempts to deepen public-private partnership. For example, the partnership on cybersecurity, which was created in 2016, triggering up to 1.8 million euros of investment. Another challenge, IoT will complicate several already existing cybersecurity questions, including legal ones, questions of liability, attribution, but also the effect of foreign acquisition on critical technologies, and so on. And last but not least, there are many more unknowns. Unknowns that we know about, and unknowns that we don't know about. Like in the 50s and 60s of the internet. I'm sure, that there are windsurfs and Bob Kahns out there having answers to our questions. But IoT remains inconceivable to majority of us, present or future users of IoT. So how to face the challenges? The right answer is to have multi-stakeholder, holistic, comprehensive approach. There are many policies, there are many strategies. I would like to talk about regulations. I would argue that it is generally agreed that IoT needs regulation and certification. But at the same time, it raises classical questions. How not to over-regulate, especially in the EU, that is already too over-regulated and too bureaucratic, whose single market is, in real terms, composition, fragmentation of 28 markets. European has on balance proven to be too slow in adopting and diffusing technical innovations. European startups do not go to London, Berlin, or Paris. They go to Silicon Valley. They go to Vancouver. Yes, they go there where there's money, and that has to be taken care of. But they also go there because there's less bureaucracy and less complicated regulations. And here, EU can do much better. For example, with digitally powered government, the delivery of more targeted, more efficient and less bureaucratic services. Again, according to the EU Commission estimates, it is suggested that the digital single market could cut the administrative burden in the public sector by 15 to 20%. Another study suggests that the use of open data could reduce public administration costs across the EU by 1.7 billion euro by 2020. Coming back to digital signatures. Digital signatures in Estonia save us annually 2% of GDP. They save us annually 5 working days. People don't have to go anywhere, they don't have to stay in the queues. I understand we shouldn't be crazy about these services, because in Estonia we are at the stage where there are only 3 services you can't do at home. It's giving birth, getting married, and buying property. Everything else can be done without leaving your house. But I think that for the EU, there is a lot to think about with digital signatures and single market. Regulations can foster market, but they can also hinder development and innovation. Hopefully, IoT will not boost unreasonable and unnecessary regulations. I agree that it needs regulation, but should not be over-regulated. I also think that no regulation is better than bad regulation. Some words about grey zones. Grey zones and unpredictability might be tempting for bad guys to try the boundaries of what is allowed and what is not. What might be the response in the case if boundaries are lightly violated? Narrowing of grey zones enhances normative stability in cyberspace. Here I agree with Professor Mike Schmidt, Professor of International Law, University of Exeter, Director of the Tallinn Manual Project, that legal ambiguity also hobbles responses. He analyzed grey zones in the international law of cyberspace. We see it already today how some states play on the legal margins of applicability of international law in real life as well as in cyber. Green men in Crimea raised the question of responsibility of a state for the acts of a non-state actor. DNC hacks have raised the question of sovereignty. Interference into elections have raised the question of protection of critical infrastructure of elections. This is just a couple of examples how grey areas are used already today and will most probably expand and will most probably be expanded significantly with IoT. And last but not least is the question of timing. IoT security measures have to be established before device vulnerabilities start killing people, as said Bruce Schneier, a veteran cybersecurity expert and Harvard lecturer at the hearings in the Congress. So what can be done? Where, in which institutions, at what level? I believe that every organization and every platform has its role. We can't stop discussions and we shouldn't stop the discussions. 2004, when Estonia joined NATO and EU and we tried to talk about cybersecurity, nobody was talking about cybersecurity. 2007, picture changed. Some institutions started discussing cybersecurity. Today, name me one institution that is not discussing cybersecurity. Everybody is doing that, and that's good. Sometimes it's good to have educational and awareness-raising events, knowing that there are not going to be results. So I believe that UN should look into applicability of international law and responsibility of states. OSCE should continue with confidence-building measures. EU should continue with digital market. NATO with cyber defense, and so on and so on. The global effects of the IoT were discussed in the United Nations GGE, Group of Governmental Experts on Cybersecurity, last year. GGE could not produce a consensus report that it was mandated to do, but it had constructive discussions and made progress in almost all fields of the mandate, altogether 5 fields: emerging threats, international law, norms of responsible state behavior, capacity building, confidence building. The only field that UNGG could not make progress was international law. And that was the reason why the report was not adopted. The GG on the level in the United Nations addressed the IoT in the chapter Existing and Emerging Threats in the context of the fast pace of technological innovation combined with rapid and widespread technology adoption. Experts acknowledged that the IoT technology, as well as cloud technology, robotics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning could be exploited with implications for international peace and security. The group also expressed concern about the security of the supply chain of ICT products and services, including harmful hidden functions. The group suggested some recommendations, recognizing that confidence in the security of ICT products is essential for maintaining an open, secure, stable, accessible, and peaceful ICT environment. The group recommended to take steps, including through existing fora, to prevent the proliferation of malicious ICT tools and techniques. In doing so, states should encourage the legitimate activities of research communities, academia, industry, law enforcement, CERTs, and other cyber protection agencies in ensuring the security of their ICT systems. The group recommended that states should take steps to prevent non-state actors, including private sector, from conducting malicious ICT activities for their own purposes or those of other non-state actors to the detriment of third parties, including those located on another state's territory. These recommendations are not groundbreaking. They are political, they are pretty general, but they have to be recognized, because it was the first time when in the United Nations the question and the challenges of IoT were discussed. When I look at the recommendations, what I think is important is first that GG acknowledged IoT as one of the new emerging threats. Second, it underlined the need to take steps to minimize the risks and challenges. Third, it recognized the growing role of non-state actors. And finally, it underlined the multi-stakeholder approach. Cooperation, including private sector, industry, academia, technical community, law enforcement, civil society, and so on. Although GG failed and could not adopt the consensus report, I think that at least these parts of the negotiations, of the discussions, should be discussed and elaborated further in other forums. On the regional level, serious attempts to deal with the new threats are also being undertaken within the EU. Just a couple of things to mention. After 4 years of preparation and debate, the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, was adopted in May 2016 and will enter into force in May 2018. European Parliament launched in February a public consultation on robotics and artificial intelligence. Some weeks ago, European Commission put forward a proposal to set up an EU cybersecurity certification framework that will lay down the procedure for the creation of EU-wide cybersecurity certification schemes covering products, services, systems, which adapt the level of assurance to the use involved. It would avoid fragmentation of certification. The schemes would be voluntary and would not create any immediate regulatory obligations on vendors or service providers. This brings me to the question of trust. Trust is the core of digital services. Without trust, people will not buy or use internet services. Digital transformation can only be supported in a world where people feel safe to go online. And here, governments have a crucial role and responsibility in building and keeping trust of consumers. It is government's obligation to guarantee secure exchange of data, integrity of data, secure authentication of persons online, and so on. Although it is important to work globally and regionally, I will not underestimate also national endeavors. With local people, with local businesses, with local multi-stakeholders, because it gives the feeling of ownership and real engagement to those people. And I'd like to bring an example of discussions that are taking place just now, currently in Estonia. If you want to follow them, then please #eEstonia. A year ago, a self-driving vehicles task force was launched by the Government Office and the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Communications, and included experts from all walks of life. They were tasked to analyze the questions related to self-driving cars and propose legal framework. However, it quickly became clear that their mandate was too limited. Instead, the task force decided to streamline the whole process and deliver legal regulation of AI. The legal regulation of AI will have a deep and far-reaching impact on the everyday lives of our people. The task force suggests that for Estonian economy it means pulling down barriers for the further digitalization of industries, bringing in new investments, creating new jobs. Legal clarity is the biggest obstacle for wide-scale implementation. Potential investors have the right to know what happens if something happens. There's one law firm, Trinity, involved in the work of the task force that has outlined the options of giving representative rights to IA. It means that IA can buy and sell products and services on behalf of its owners. The owner might be a private individual using Siri, or a brokerage firm that uses algorithms to buy and sell shares. There are still many open questions, and there still needs to be thorough discussion. One of the most intriguing questions is probably the idea to give separate legal status of a subject to AI. It means that AI would be an individual and separate legal entity with both rights and responsibilities. It would be similar to a company, but will not necessarily involve humans. Its responsibilities and liabilities will most probably be covered by some type of insurance policy, perhaps similar to the present ones used for vehicle and motor insurances. By the way, there is already one company in Finland with AI as a voting board member. Finnish IT services firm Tieto has added software to a leadership team that oversees a recently formed data-focused business group. The bot, or artificial intelligence agent, is referred to as Alicia T. Alicia T will have the opportunity to participate in team meetings and cast a vote on business directions, according to the company's press release. Tieto claims that it's the first Nordic company to place artificial intelligence in a position of leadership. In 2014, an investment fund based in Hong Kong, Deep Knowledge Ventures, declared that it had appointed a machine learning program called Vital to its board of directors, an assertion at odds with Hong Kong law. Similarly, the Finnish corporate governance code suggests that Alicia T will never qualify as a full-fledged member of Tieto's board of directors because software is not legally recognized as a person. I would argue it's time to change the laws. In Estonia, we have recognized the complexity, scope, and the options of the issues. Today, we are aiming at contributing to the global discussions with case studies, emphasizing ethics and cyber measures. The immense and cutting-edge possibilities of IoT and IA cannot be enabled if we don't have both the right values and the right regulations. To conclude, I like e-voting and digital signatures. I like e-taxation and e-prescriptions. I want my refrigerator to keep its eye on my groceries and remind my self-driving car to pick up some products from the nearby food store. I want my watch to follow my blood pressure and communicate with my doctor, of course as less as possible and only if needed. And I want to enjoy it in a safe and secure way. Once again, we are at a critical turning point, one that requires rational, level-headed, forward-looking, and ambitious decisions to be made. I'd like to wish us all success. Thank you.
I think that was such a wonderful speech and such expertise and experience and that wonderful finish. I won't seek to take questions. Marina, we have a drinks reception now. I think Marina will be here for that. So please feel free to lobby her, if that's the right expression, gain from her expertise. Some of us who were privileged to have a dinner here last night, a pre-conference dinner, our after-dinner speaker was Liam Maxwell, who is the National Technology Advisor for the current government, and he was complimenting 2 countries in the world for their e-ness in government. One was India, for the sheer scale of what they're doing, and the other was Estonia. So you're leading the way in many ways, and those questions you asked are fundamental. I think we tackled some of them here today. There are no right and wrong answers, no clear answers. There might be some rights and wrongs, but there are no clear answers. We've had some great debate. Thank you, everybody, for taking part. As we said earlier, someone is writing this up. Liam did say last night he would like to see a copy of what we come up with. I'm sure Marina would be interested too, because we have, as I said, we had a very wide-ranging debate. So thank you all for taking part in that. I would like to thank the Royal Society team again, Camilla Tetley, she's here, and Katie, and everyone else that's helped them. I'd like to thank all the speakers, panellists. You've all been wonderful. We've kept more or less to time. It's been a long day, but everyone's been brilliant under instruction. I'd like to thank my fellow co-chairs, Patricia and Jeremy Squared, and go and have a fantastic, have another networking session over the drinks. And thank you all again. Let's say thank you to everybody.